Lightning like Steve McQueen. I'm in the fast lane when the light turns green. And I built tough, I ain't nothing but grit. Cause I made rugged blood, sweat, and spit. Yeah, like a horse I fly. Better push yourself in for a bumpy ride. I like to play hard, but I work harder. And I weather the storm cause I'm built stronger.
What is up, ladies and gentlemen? We are back. We are live. It is the Freight Coach Podcast, the top podcast in transportation, coming to you guys every single weekday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Central, to break down some industry headlines. But most importantly, you guys provide some actual insight into what you can do with all of this information. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. This is the real side of freight, ladies and gentlemen. And I say that before every single show. And what I mean by that is I only speak with transportation professionals, because at the end of the day, you guys, I want to talk to the right individuals who have done what you're looking to do or who are currently doing what you're trying to achieve. So you can take that information, apply it, utilize it, and see a meaningful difference in your business and your life. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Quick note before I bring my guest up here today. The weekly newsletter dropped this morning, but I don't auto-register anybody for newsletters because it annoys the shit out of me. And the poll that I put out there on LinkedIn said it annoys the shit out of all of you. So if you want to get this newsletter, you guys, go to thefreightcoach.com and it will auto-prompt you to register. It drops every Wednesday. It is always about education and insight. We put some fuel data in there. We've now put some market data in there as well for my friends over at Green Screens. We're going to start tracking lanes, seasonalities, and all of that stuff in there, because I'm going to teach you guys how to read freight markets, because the reason why you guys tune into this is your boy actually brokers freight, and I'm not just a pretty face, although that is a large portion of my service offering out there, as being a good-looking dude. But anyways, you guys, we're going to jump into a topic that I feel like is imperative to what will be going on in 2025. A lot of people are already experiencing this with tightening markets out there, and there is nobody who is more qualified to talk about this today than my friend Nick Dangles, back on the show. Nick, what is going on, brother? How are you?
Hey, Chris, good to see you, man. I'm enjoying staring at your pretty face. A large part of your service offering over here.
I know. We locked eyes in Jacksonville after the last time we saw each other at the airport, and we hung out. It was magical.
It was. Do your brokerage prospects feel good about the pretty face? Does it help you land more customers?
You know, that's why I cold call, man.
Oh, they don't get to see you.
Yeah, I got a face for radio. You know what I mean? So, dude,
Well, thanks for having me on. It's good talking to you again, man.
No, absolutely. And, you know, we're talking about a topic that I know both of us are passionate about, right? I mean, ever since essentially the first time you and I connected, I mean, almost 5 years ago now, man, it's been something that has been at the top of both of our radars. It's something that's a large part of the success of my freight brokerage. And we're going to be talking about this, you know, even at the TIA Capital Ideas Conference, which is going to be in April, you guys, out in San Antonio. And Nick and I are taking part in an inaugural sales summit, is what it's called. And it's going to be happening on the Saturday of the event, where it's going to be a day action-packed of training and development of multiple different topics. Nick's going to be talking about carrier sales. I'm going to be talking about kind of like a hybrid of building up your book of business from customer sales and carrier sales as well. So, Nick, what, like, your session is on carrier sales entirely, right?
Yep. So it's an hour. It's entirely on carrier sales. The title of it, which might need some work, is it's called Carrier Sales, with sales all in caps, because a lot of times, like in brokerages I talk to, carrier sales almost gets seen as a cost center, right? Because you've got these people who are just like pounding out phone calls, talking to carriers, covering freight, and they forget that it's actually a sales job, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're not just pounding out phone calls to carriers. Like, the good carrier reps out there should actually be selling to these carriers. So we're going to talk about how sales actually becomes a big component of carrier sales.
Yeah, and why I think that going into this year, it's going to be the biggest year for something like this, and probably the last 4 years is let's call it what it is. It's been easy to cover freight since 2020, you guys. I'm not saying if freight's been cheap or anything like that all the time, but essentially it's been very easy to cover freight. I don't know of anybody that's really struggled in that time finding capacity for these loads that have been moving. And I think we're already starting to see it, right? Like, I'm already starting to see some grumblings out there from some brokers talking about how, like, carriers need to think about relationship, all that bullshit that they were all talking about back in 2019 before things changed. And then everybody's been bumping their chests about how cool they are at brokering freight. And now we're starting to see that. And it's like the first sign of adversity or a change in market. Boom, everybody flips the script and they're crying about it. And it's like, man, where have you been the last 5 years? Right? Like we've what we institute inside of my operation is we literally utilize the same carriers for almost all of our freight, right? Like we did a large drayage project to end the year last year. We used 3 trucking companies that did 90% of those moves. And then we build up capacity based on lanes that our customers are moving, that our carriers like to run, as opposed to shoving the rate down their throat and saying, you got to take it for less, and then pulling them off the load if they do a, whatever, even if they do a good job because you want to find it for cheaper.
Yeah. And I do want to touch on what you said about the tightening of capacity, right? It's interesting because we're at a point now where, just like you said, carriers have been really easy to find for the past several years, right? Like finding carriers for loads has not been hard. There's been a surplus of capacity. And now we're entering this time frame where you have people brokering freight who only entered the market during a soft market. And they have no idea what it takes to actually find capacity when capacity is tight. So the topic of carrier sales and being able to actually effectively source carriers and build relationships is going to become extremely important once the market does start to flip. And I mean, I'm not here to debate whether or not that's happening or not. Like I brokered freight for 10 years, but I'm not in a brokerage right now. I sell a training platform called Sync Logistics Training. But like, as this market does start to turn, it's going to eventually, having some fundamentals for carrier sales is going to be extremely important for people. And it's going to be a rude awakening for people who have never experienced it before.
Yeah. The market is definitely changing in areas that are being affected by natural disasters and weather. I would say that that's kind of it across the board. Again, I don't move a ton of dry van freight, so I can't really speak to the dry van market that's out there. The flatbed market hasn't necessarily changed all of that much, if I'm being completely honest. But I think that the tides are starting to turn in now, and I've been saying, like, the only real way that will like expedite a market shift is like a natural disaster. And then people are just going to be like, well, damn, if you were paying me $4,000 last week, guess what? You're paying $4,000 this week, or I'm not moving my truck. And then when there's a large percentage of capacity that got those rates, they might be more willing to sit and wait it out. And I think with, unfortunately, with the wildfires that are going on in Southern California right now, everybody knows Southern California, massive freight market, right? And if there is a tightening or a changing of capacity in SoCal, that will have a ripple effect across, all of the West Coast and probably the Western 11 states, I think.
Yeah. And like, honestly, regardless of how or when it happens, like we all know it's going to happen, right? Capacity is going to tighten back up at some point. And if you're accustomed to just posting your loads up and waiting for the phone to ring, well, once the phone stops ringing, you're going to have a problem on your hands if you don't know how to actually proactively source carriers.
So how would somebody go out there and actively source carriers? Like, what is something that you have found to be effective, or what is something you're going to be talking about here at the summit to really lay that blueprint out, right? Because this is the entire purpose of this show, you guys, is education and insight, because we only know what we know. And I'm always going to talk about the fundamentals of this industry, the blocking and the tackling, because I know that is what works out there when you're actually winning business. So I'll stop and let you go from there, Nick.
No, it's a good question. I think it diverges a little bit from what I'll talk about at the sales summit. What you're talking about in terms of how to find carriers, I call like having a carrier prospecting strategy, right? And like every brokerage out there should have some sort of strategy behind how they're prospecting for carriers, right? And it shouldn't be, hey, we post our loads and see what happens, right? You should have a strategy in terms of, well, first I call my in-network carriers who have moved this load before. Then I call my in-network carriers who might be a good fit for this load. Then I call some pre-qualified out-of-network carriers, like whatever that case may be. Like you should have some form of standardized carrier prospecting strategy that you actually follow when sourcing a carrier for a new lane, right? from there, like once you're actually like engaged with the carrier, like that's when the sales comes into play.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's a big difference between just reading a carrier the load details versus actually selling the load to them.
Yeah.
Right. Like if you're just reading load details, I mean, like any of the AI bots out there can do that just fine. And like if you're a carrier rep and your job's just reading details to carriers, I mean, you're going to be outperformed by these bots in no time. I was just talking to somebody the other day, like their AI bots are booking like 15 loads a day, and some of their carrier reps are only booking 6. Like,
yeah,
like the difference is sales, right?
Yeah.
Like if you're actually building relationships with the carriers, selling them on not just individual loads, but opportunities, like internally marketing your capacity is something I talk about a lot, like talking with your account managers and trying to figure out like where your capacity can help them win more business. Like those are things that actually make a carrier rep valuable. If you're just out there like on the phone, posting loads, reading details to carriers, like you're gonna be outperformed by a bot.
No, absolutely, man. And, I look at it as, because it is like, it's going to be interesting to see where a lot of this stuff kind of comes about, right? Like I'll be having some of these companies coming on the show here. I'm not going to sit here and say like, I'm all AI or anything like that, but I feel like people need to be aware of what's out there. And, again, somebody might be looking for something like that for their business. So that's really the main point of talking to a lot of these individuals. But at the end of the day, you guys, I look at it as like anybody, and then especially as things continue to tighten up or, as the market continues to shift and, new business opportunities come about, again, I'm just speaking from somebody who's actually in the trenches and cold calling shippers and everybody else, you guys. My cold calls are exponentially higher ROI when I go in there with a niche focus that I do, right? Full truckload, open deck. Exponentially higher response rate, exponentially longer conversations with the prospects, because I'm not going in there to say that I can do everything for them. Because frankly, could I? Yes, but do I want to? Absolutely not. That's not the stage of where my business is right now. We are full truckload. We are open deck. And for me to be able to go in there and prospect with the customer and let them know like, hey, I know your product only ships on step decks because it's probably about 9 feet tall based on some of the dimensions I read. I know we're going to need edge protectors. Is this a job? Yada, 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 and so on. I need to be able to take all of that, though, to give to my carrier sales team so they can go out there and find carriers based on my customers' commodities. All right. That is like a lost art out there. I mean, Sonny Sharma, he's watching the show right now. My guy here, he specializes in reefer freight, primarily proteins, right? My friend Cody Kaler with A&Z Trucking, they also specialize in reefer freight, primarily in produce though, right? That's 2 separate drivers that are going to do each of those loads, right? And if you're out there just posting freight and then just trying to find somebody with a pulse that might work in the market that we're currently in, but as things continue to tighten up, the carriers are extremely selective about the freight that they're going to take. And you need to find those drivers that are out there and they are needing to, actually haul the freight that you have, because there are a myriad of drivers out there who won't do certain types of freight. They, in my world, they won't do overdimensional. They won't do crane offload for whatever reason. You need to find that out, because as you're going out there and trying to source carriers, you don't want to call somebody that literally won't do it. It's a wasted opportunity at that point.
Yeah. And like a couple of things I mentioned earlier that you kind of like also hit on a little bit is when you do talk to these carriers and you find a carrier that's a good fit for a load or for your business, it's important not to just sell them on an individual transactional load, right? What you want to do is you want to build that relationship and then sell them on the entire opportunity. If you have a lane that moves 3 times a week, every week for the next year, right? And you book a carrier on 1 load, like on one hand, good job, right? Like you booked a carrier on 1 load. You've cleared 1 load off your board for today. The problem a lot of people run into is they kind of lack the forethought of seeing that you have this lane 3 times a week, every week for the rest of the year. What you want to do is you want to lock that carrier down on as many of those as you can, provided they're a good carrier, they have a good rate, and they're a good fit for the business, right?
Yeah.
As long as they're a good business partner for you, give them all of that freight. Sell the opportunity. Don't just focus on that one transaction. Clearing today's board isn't the goal. right?
Yeah.
Clearing the today's board is the goal for brokers who are really going to plateau at around like 10 mil. What you want to do is you want to think proactively and sell carriers on opportunities.
No, I mean, that's exactly it, right?
And that's
Like
the
we
sales
are.
aspect again, right?
Yeah. No, 100%, man. And sorry, your screen froze there. Were you?
Oh, maybe I was moving
Okay.
too fast.
Yeah. But,
Well, I hate
again,
this.
here's another real life example, right? Like we're out there, we're building up our customer base right now, right? So we don't have a ton of consistent freight. We have a couple of anchor shippers that we work with that are out of certain freight markets that are going, but one thing that we do, again, is like, hey, we know these guys have step deck Conestogas or flatbed Conestogas. So any new customer that we start moving freight with, even if it's in a different geographic region, we go to our trusted carriers first, right? Where it's like, hey, man, we have this load. You usually pick up for me out of, say, New Mexico going to Dallas. Now we have this new customer that's out of Kentucky going to Kansas. Do you have anything in that area? We don't want to go to a load board. A load board's a great tool, but like, I already know this awesome carrier called ACR Logistics that I work with, the legit company name, by the way. And we work with them and we know they have Conestogas. They do a phenomenal job for us. Why wouldn't I offer them that load first? Especially when we're booking them initially and we ask them, hey, what lanes is it that you like to run out there? Because we know you don't just run New Mexico to Dallas, for a hypothetical example. And then they're like, actually, Chris, here's where we also like to run. We like to run this region, that region. We build up a carrier profile for everybody that we book so we know who to reach out to. And that is something that we follow religiously inside of our operation. And my business partner and I are 100% committed to continuing that philosophy as we grow and scale, because we know that that's what works. We're thinking long-term, right? And then another thing in the open deck world, we're bidding on a lot of project freight for the future, all right? There's not a lot of consistent, hey, all of these loads, at least not in our book of business yet, where it's like we're bidding on project freight. We're going on certain freight in the future. And guess what? When we're awarded that stuff, I want those trusted carriers to be on that customer's freight. And then the more of a heads up they have, they can route all of their trucks into those areas. And again, we're not going to the load board. That's not our first sign of we have a new shipment. Oh, go post it up, try and find something. It's like, no, go call our regulars. It's RFP season right now. For example, we call our regular carriers to be like, hey, man, what are you projecting in 2025 for these lanes? What can we do? Because we want to place these bids based on the rates you're providing us. And then bonus, we win this freight. Dude, we're on auto tender at that point.
Again, you hit on a few things there that I would love to touch on. So
let's do it.
You talked about building out carrier profiles. There's certainly things people should do. And you also said something about like some brokerages not necessarily having that consistent freight. And this is something I hear a lot, right? Like I went on that whole like selling opportunities soapbox, and admittedly, it's tougher if you don't have the consistency in your freight, right? If all you have is spot market freight, it's tougher to sell opportunities. But what you can do, and what a lot of brokers forget to do, is this thing that I call like internally marketing your capacity.
Yep.
What your team should be doing every time you build out a carrier profile and you find out that XYZ carrier runs Dallas to Houston like every single day, right? You as a carrier rep, go to your customer facing team and say, hey, I have this carrier. They run Dallas to Houston every single day. What do you guys have that could possibly match up with that carrier? You need to make sure that your customer facing team knows where you have available capacity, and then they can sell to their customers with more confidence based on the capacity that you have, right? If you're not telling them, if they're just like out there spray and pray, trying to catch whatever freight they can possibly find, like that doesn't work very well. If they can be more targeted and find freight based on the capacity that you have available, they're going to have a lot more success. And that's, again, it's the sales aspect of carrier sales, right? Like you have to be selling your capacity to your customer facing team, so they know what they have available. They're going to have a lot more success, and so are you that way. I'm going to pause there, see if you have comments.
No, absolutely. Because, and I also look at it as, long-term here as well, Nick, right? Like identity theft, fraud, all of this stuff is going up, so it's like there are, software and stuff that's out there right now, but is it actually working? The data says that probably not so much, right? So what is the only tried and true method to actually fight this stuff? I'm kind of an open-ended question here, but yeah, I think we all know the answer. You want to know? I know this. I know these carriers that I'm booking every single day are legit because I work with them every single day. I'm not risking my customers' freight to go out with an unknown provider that, and again, I know that there's times where we have to use unknown providers, and there's great software out there that can help you vet these guys to make sure that they're legit. But ultimately, though, as you will experience, it's the only tried and true method that I know to actually know, like, that this carrier is who they say they are. This is a driver that I've worked with numerous times. I know this person's wife, or I know that driver's husband's name. I know their family because we talk all the time. There's more of a relationship there that will always come about. And then they will take your customer's freight way more seriously because they view you as a partner, and a little respect goes a very long way in this industry.
Yeah. I mean, I'll piggyback off of that and almost talk about the reverse, right? I mean, we talk about fraud from a broker's perspective a lot, getting burned by carriers. But at the same time, like, you also have to sell your carriers on being a good business partner to them. Yes. I mean, there are a lot of brokers going out of business. There are a lot of bad brokers out there who basically scumbag their carriers in a variety of different ways. So, like, part of building that relationship and part of selling to these carriers is like letting them know that you're going to be a good business partner for them.
Yeah.
And that's things like the selling of opportunities is important, right? Like, does a carrier necessarily want individual transactional loads? No, I mean, some of them do, some of them play the spot market, but a lot of them operate just like you do. Like, they'd like to have the consistency in the business, right? Mm-hmm. It helps them fill their trucks. It helps them understand that you're a financially stable company if you have that type of consistency in your business. So you then are going to be a better business partner for them, and they're going to want to haul your freight compared to the broker down the street who's only giving you these individual transactions, right? So, like, it's a two-way street. It's not just like, vetting the carriers. I mean, carriers are also vetting you, you know? So, like, as you present these loads and like your business to them, present it in a way that you seem like a good business partner for them.
Yeah, as they should, by the way. Mm-hmm. Every single driver out there should vet every single broker that they work with. And I think that this is where, some of the load boards do a very good job of showing like the credit worthiness of the broker and days to pay and all of that stuff. I think that's a great piece of information for the driver community out there, that they know that, hey, maybe if I'm booking with ABC Logistics, damn, their credit score's a 97 or a 98. They actually pay within 15 days. No quick pay fee or whatever, I don't know what it is, but like, again, there's information out there now that shows that they're viable. If they have the factor check mark, double plus if they factor with denim. But, on top of that, though, we're out there. There's ways for people to show that, hey, this company's viable, right? Like, as a business owner myself, and Nick, you can attest to this as well. If you don't get paid by somebody, like most small businesses, you guys, which is like 90% of the trucking industry, and that's brokerage and trucking looped into that, you guys, they're all small business. Most small businesses, you guys, are within 30 days of going out of business every single month. And it exponentially increases if one person doesn't pay them. Like that is a very big risk out there for operating out on your own. Is are you going to actually get paid for the work that you're doing? So why wouldn't you want to build that partnership? Like, you need to look at this as a two-way street. And again, you will be able to see more and more of this unfold as the year unfolds, if capacity continues to tighten up, about brokers now crying foul. Okay. You had 4 years to develop a relationship, right? And relationships aren't do what I say, I'm broker. That's not the case at all, and I think that it's going to be very revealing on who actually walks the walk as this year progresses.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny how reactive, I guess, brokers and transportation in general tends to be. I mean, you're going to see the market tighten up and all of a sudden there are going to be these changes that take place. But like, the best brokers out there are the ones who, over the past several years, even when like capacity has been loose, they've been building their relationships. They've been treating their carriers the right way. And these are the ones who are going to have success in tightened market conditions because they've already established those relationships, right? They're not all of a sudden, oh man, capacity is tight, I got to build carrier relationships. Like they've been doing it consistently the whole time. So it's going to be interesting.
No, for sure. And, again, I've only literally been talking about this exact topic for about 5 years now. But again, don't take it from me. All right. Don't take it from me at all. If you don't believe me, if you think you have it all figured out there and you're a broker and you're hearing this and you're thinking like, oh, it's never going to change, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, I wish you the best of luck. If you are a broker who's like, damn, what these guys are talking about is pretty legit, I'm actually starting to experience this, I don't want to lose my entire book of business due to a inability for us to cover freight, because I will insert this caveat right now, you guys. Shippers will have the lowest tolerance of all time for service failures when things start to change. All right. They will have the lowest failure, and you will see more customers switch providers, I personally think, in the next 12 to 18 months than probably any time in the past, because they are going off of, again, a 4-year run of easy to cover freight. And now we're going to be entering into, if this happens, tolerance for failure is going to be at an all-time low. You might get one chance to redeem yourself, but if you don't change your ways, it's, as they say on South Park, you're going to have a bad time. Okay. And then I don't want to see that happen. That's why I will always continue to talk about best practices. That's why Nick and the TIA are going to be putting on this entire sales summit to talk about this literal topic alone for Nick's session. I'm going to be touching on it. I don't know. There's like 5 or 6 other people who are doing this, you guys, and we're here to talk about best practices. That's why you need to align with these events.
Yeah, I'm going to go down a rabbit hole briefly.
Let's do it.
This isn't really sales oriented, but like you talked about service failures and stuff. And I think another thing that brokers sometimes overlook is having an appropriate amount of depth in your carrier network, right? They'll have a lane that they run regularly. They'll have one carrier that does a great job running it. And like, that's all well and good, but like what happens if they can't move a load one day, right? Like what happens if there's a last minute problem, And as capacity tightens up, it's going to become more and more problematic. So having one carrier on a lane is kind of opening yourself up for disaster, right? Yeah. You have to have like a secondary, tertiary, and like multiple carriers that you could use on specific lanes, so you don't run into a problem if that one carrier like goes out of business, right? Like then what do you do? So having depth in that carrier network is also super important.
No, that's 100% the truth, right? You need your primary, your secondary, and then I call them my oh shit carrier. Those are the ones that are always going to be there. They always have capacity. They might be more expensive than everybody else, but guess what? They're going to get the job done. And, it's gotten to that point where you need, if you were cool enough to make $1,000 on a load or $500 on a load, it's going to come to that point here, you guys, where you better be cool enough to lose $500 on a load, especially if you have contracted freight, because the way that this market shift will happen, and again, I've said this about 100 times and I'll say it 100 more. Mark my words here, you guys. This is how this market shift will happen. Shippers will not increase their rates. All right. I wouldn't be surprised if they don't increase their rates in a meaningful way in all of 2025 at all. Carriers will increase their rates. Your margins will get compressed out there. Okay. Are you at that broker that you've sold yourself on when that happens? Because that is how the real market transitions, you guys. It's not, oh, hey, I'm just going to go to my customer and then they're just going to give me all of this additional money right away and my margins will be fine. That's not the way it's going to work, okay? So you need to take that into consideration as things progressed out there. But Nick, this flew by, as it always does, because I am very passionate about this topic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you at TIA and sitting in on your session for sure.
Yeah, same, man. I'm looking forward to seeing yours as well.
Perfect, man. How does anybody reach out to you to find out more about Sync, though?
Yeah, so if you want to reach out to me, like you said, my company is Sync Logistics Training. Feel free to shoot me a message on LinkedIn. I stay fairly active on there, though not as much recently. Or shoot me an email. It's just nick@synclogisticstraining.com.
Perfect. I appreciate that, man. And that's going to be it for today, you guys. If you want to see Nick and I speak, TIA, Capital Ideas Conference, San Antonio, Texas. It's in April. I don't have the link in front of me or the exact dates, and I should have done that. But Come see us out there. As always, if you guys got value in what you heard today, which I know you did, subscribe to the show. If you're feeling really fired up after this episode, rank the show on iTunes and Spotify as well, because that helps us increase our exposure and reach more people, because if you saw value, your network's going to see value as well. I appreciate you guys. I love you guys, and we'll be talking to you soon. Dude, I'm